Imagine an invisible force shaping the world around you, not through physical laws we can measure, but through symbols, myths, and deep psychic energies. What if I told you that this force is not just an abstract concept from ancient tales, but a powerful tool that, in the right hands, can influence reality in surprising ways? Magic, for many, conjures images of spells and esoteric rituals, but its essence, especially in the work of figures like Aleister Crowley, lies in an understanding and manipulation of archetypes. What exactly are these archetypes, and how did a man from the late 19th and early 20th centuries, with his peculiar blend of mysticism, occultism, and a relentless analytical mind, manage to harness them to, according to his followers and critics, effectively rewrite the rules of existence? This exploration delves into the intersection of depth psychology and magical practice, focusing on how Crowley, one of the most controversial and influential occultists in history, uncovered and applied the universal patterns of the human psyche, the archetypes, to effect change on the material and spiritual planes. The central question that will guide us is, how did the understanding and activation of these primordial models of the collective consciousness allow Crowley not only to understand the universe, but also, in a calculated and intentional way, to exert significant influence over it? This is not a superficial dive into fantastical rituals, but an investigation into the architecture of the mind and the cosmos, and how one individual dared to restructure this architecture to achieve his often enigmatic goals. We are about to unveil a universe where Jungian psychology meets ancient theurgy, where the very structure of human perception is seen as a portal to manifestation. The journey promises to be challenging, revealing, and for many, perhaps a little disturbing, as it touches on the very nature of what we consider reality and the human capacity to transform it. Aleister Crowley's legacy, often overshadowed by his reputation as the wickedest man in the world, is actually an intricate tapestry of philosophy, religion, psychology, and, of course, magic. His approach to magic, which he termed the science and art of causing change in conformity with will, differed radically from many previous traditions. Rather than focusing solely on invoking entities or manipulating external forces, Crowley devoted himself to a profound study of the human mind and its inherent patterns. He identified that certain images, symbols, and narratives resonated at a deep subconscious level, crossing cultures and eras. These are the archetypes, the universal patterns of thought, imagery, and behavior that Carl Jung would later describe as inherited psychic units and forms of experience. Crowley's genius, scholars argue, was recognizing that these archetypes were not mere theoretical concepts, but potent psychic energies that could be activated and directed. In his quest to understand and express the great work, the union of the finite with the infinite, or the realization of the divine potential within the human being, Crowley immersed himself in diverse esoteric traditions, from Kabbalah and Gnosticism to Tantra and Tibetan Buddhism. However, he was no mere compiler. He sought a synthesis, a system that could be applied practically and verifiably. The historical context in which Crowley flourished, the late Victorian era and early 20th century, was a time of profound intellectual and social change. Scientific advances were challenging traditional religious beliefs, at the same time that psychology, with figures like Freud and Jung, was beginning to explore the depths of the unconscious mind. Crowley positioned himself at this threshold, utilizing the methods of science and psychology to validate and codify occult practices. He saw archetypes as the fundamental language of the collective unconscious, and magic as the method for communicating with this language and thus influencing reality. His most famous work, The Book of the Law, allegedly received in a trance state in 1904, is a text laden with archetypal symbolism that outlines the principles of his philosophy and magical practice. Thelema. The fundamental premise is that each individual possesses a true will, a unique and divine purpose, and magic is the path to discovering and manifesting this will. For Crowley, archetypes were the building blocks of this manifestation, the forms through which cosmic energy could be directed and expressed in the world. He did not believe in external gods who granted favors, but in internal, universal forces that could be activated through specific rituals and practices, channeled by a deep understanding of these primordial models. The fascination with Crowley lies, in part, in the audacity of his vision that human beings, by mastering themselves and understanding the hidden laws of the universe, can become active agents in the creation of their own reality and, by extension, the reality of the world. The core of Crowley's approach to magic and reality manipulation lies in his understanding and application of archetypes, those primordial patterns of human experience that operate in the collective unconscious. For Crowley, archetypes were not merely passive symbols or ancient myths, but dynamic, energetic forces that could be consciously invoked, activated, and directed. He realized that certain mythical figures, symbols, and narratives represent fundamental aspects of the human psyche and the very fabric of the universe. By working with these archetypes, the magical practitioner could access and channel the underlying energies they represented, thus influencing both their inner and outer worlds. One of the most prominent archetypes in Crowley's work is that of Horus and its correlate, the sun. Horus in Egyptian mythology is the god of the sky, war, and royalty, often associated with revenge against the usurper Set, who killed his father, Osiris. Crowley interpreted Horus as the archetype of the new cycle, of the young god succeeding the old, representing rebirth, achievement, and the manifestation of the will. The Book of the Law, for example, states in its preface, "This book was written by Aiwass in the year 1904 CE and dictated to Rose Edith Crowley, the wife of the R.A., Aleister Crowley, by whom the prophet Aiwass delivered it." The figure of Aiwass is seen by many as an aspect of Horus, the messenger of the New Age. Crowley believed that the beginning of the 20th century marked the arrival of the Age of Horus, a new dispensation in which humanity would assume a more active and conscious role in spiritual evolution. Another crucial archetype is that of the mother goddess in her various manifestations, such as Nuit, the starry sky, infinite space, and Babylon, the mystical courtesan, the sacred prostitute. Nuit, in the Book of the Law, is described as the queen of heaven and earth, all that is, was, and will be. She represents unlimited potential, the space where all possibilities exist. Babylon, on the other hand, is the feminine manifestation of the creative force, often associated with sacred sexuality and liberation, who must be wedded by her companion, the beast god Therion, representing the incarnate man seeking fulfillment. The union of these archetypes, according to Crowley, is fundamental to the great work. He used elaborate rituals, often inspired by Egyptian, Greek, and Hindu practices, to invoke these archetypal energies. A notable example is the ritual of Babylon, where the practitioner identifies with the Babylon archetype, releasing their creative and sexual energy to manifest their will. The idea is not simply to pretend to be Babylon, but rather to become a channel for the archetypal energy she represents, allowing this force to flow through the individual and manifest tangible results. Crowley also employed the archetypes of the hero and the angel, with which he had a particularly intense and personal relationship. In his work, Liber Stelle Rubrae, he describes his encounter with his holy guardian angel, an entity that represents the true will and the divine aspect of the individual. The search for and union with this angel is central to the thelemic path, symbolizing self-realization and transcendence of the ego. The archetype of the hermit, or solitary magician, is also relevant, representing the individual who withdraws from the world to seek knowledge and inner power, a path Crowley followed extensively. He believed that magic was an experimental science, and that the manipulation of archetypes was the key to this experimentation. Through meditation, visualization, incantations, and sometimes more controversial practices, he sought to awaken and direct these archetypal energies. The repetition of certain mantras, the use of specific symbols, such as the pentagram, the hexagram, the ankh, and the enactment of ritual dramas were methods of tuning the psyche to these universal patterns, allowing the energy to be channeled for a specific purpose. Crowley's ceremonial magic, therefore, was not a theatrical spectacle, but a form of psychic engineering, where archetypes served as the blueprints and rituals as the machines for effecting changes in consciousness and reality. He saw himself as a cosmic artist, an alchemist of the soul, and the archetypes were the substances with which he worked to transmute the lead of ordinary existence into the gold of enlightenment and fulfillment. Aleister Crowley's application of archetypes was not limited to personal experiences or esoteric circles. Its implications reverberated and continue to reverberate across diverse fields, shaping culture, psychology, and even the perception of reality on a broader level. One of the most significant impacts of his work is the way he helped popularize and integrate the concept of archetypes into occult and mystical practice, especially after the dissemination of Carl Jung's ideas. Crowley demonstrated that understanding these universal patterns could be a pragmatic tool for self-knowledge and personal transformation, not merely the stuff of myth and legend. He argued that by identifying and working with the archetypes within oneself, the individual could unleash their hidden potentials, overcome psychic limitations, and align with their true will. This has a direct parallel with the modern quest for authenticity and self-improvement. Consider how many self-help gurus, without necessarily citing Crowley, borrow ideas of working with the inner self, manifesting desires, and identifying behavioral patterns, all echoes of the idea of manipulating latent psychic energies. The very notion of manifestation, popularized in contemporary self-help and spirituality movements, can be traced, in part, to Crowley's emphasis on the magical practitioner's ability to shape reality through will and the invocation of archetypal forces. His rituals and practices, though often complex and interpreted in diverse ways, contain the principles of focusing intention and channeling psychic energy to create change. Crowley's cultural impact is undeniable, even if often subterranean. His figure inspired generations of artists, musicians, and writers who absorbed his symbolism and ideas into their works. Rock and metal bands, in particular, frequently incorporated Crowleyan imagery and themes into their aesthetics and lyrics, bringing knowledge about archetypes and the occult to a wider audience, albeit in a stylized form. Furthermore, his influence can be seen in the way concepts previously restricted to esoteric circles have gradually been absorbed into popular culture. The idea that reality can be subjective, that the mind has an intrinsic creative power, and that certain symbols carry inherent power are all themes that Crowley explored and helped to seed in the collective imagination. His work also sparked an ongoing debate about the nature of religion and spirituality. By proposing Thelema as a religion of freedom, he challenged traditional dogmatic structures and emphasized individual autonomy and the search for personal truth. This approach influenced neo-pagan movements and other forms of non-traditional spirituality that emerged in the following decades. The connection between psychology and spirituality, which Jung explored deeply, was fertile ground for Crowley's work. He saw magic as a form of applied psychology, a way to explore and work with the complexities of the human psyche on a practical, experiential level. This paved the way for the integration of meditative practices, visualization, and symbol work into the fields of psychotherapy and mental well-being. On a more abstract level, Crowley forces us to question the nature of causality and human agency. If reality is, in part, a construction of consciousness, and if archetypes are the templates for this construction, then the ability to manipulate these archetypes becomes a form of significant power. His work invites us to consider that the laws governing the universe may be more fluid and malleable than we realize, and that a deep understanding of the human psyche is the key to unlocking this potential, despite the profound influence and complex system of thought that Aleister Crowley developed around the use of archetypes in magic. His work is intrinsically linked to a series of misconceptions, myths, and controversies that often obscure its central message. One of the most persistent myths is that Crowley was simply a worshipper of evil or a Satanist. This perception, fueled by his own provocative persona and the media's tendency to sensationalize his activities, ignores the theistic and humanistic nature of his Thelemic philosophy. The evil he combated was not a demonic entity, but rather ignorance, weakness of will, and repression of the individual, the forces that impede the manifestation of the true will. His rituals, which often involved sexual elements and invocations of figures that could be interpreted as dark to the untrained eye, were, in fact, attempts to work with primordial energies of life and creation, which in many cultures are considered both sacred and dangerous. Another point of confusion arises from the very complexity of his writings and practices. Crowley used rich symbolic language, often drawn from various esoteric traditions, which makes his texts challenging for the layperson. This has led to superficial interpretations and a trivialization of his teachings, reducing them to simple magical formulas without understanding the deep philosophical and psychological basis that underpinned them. For example, the idea of "doing what thou wilt shall be the whole of the law" is often quoted out of context, interpreted as a license for unbridled hedonism, when in fact, the will Crowley emphasized was a cosmic force and a profound individual purpose that required self-knowledge and rigorous discipline to discover and follow. The controversy surrounding his public persona, with allegations of involvement in secret and depraved rituals, also contributed to the difficulty in separating the man from his work. Critics and admirers alike often focus on anecdotes and scandals, diverting attention from the sophistication of his magical systems and the depth of his psychological and spiritual explorations. This dichotomy between the media persona and the occult thinker is a constant challenge for those seeking to understand his legacy in a balanced way. A common misconception is that the manipulation of archetypes, as Crowley proposed, is a form of external control over reality, as if it were a machine to be operated to obtain specific results effortlessly. In fact, Crowley saw magic as an art, requiring immense dedication, discipline, knowledge, and self-mastery. The activation of archetypes was only one part of a larger process of personal and spiritual development, the great work, which involved the transmutation of the individual. The idea that Crowley held exclusive, secret knowledge accessible only to initiates is also a myth, although he codified and organized his knowledge in systems such as the OTO, Ordo Templi Orientis, and the AA, Astrum Argenteum. His teachings were, in principle, accessible to anyone willing to undertake the arduous work of study and practice. The difficulty lay more in the depth and demands of the journey than in a deliberate concealment of information. In short, Crowley's figure and his magical methods are often distorted by sensationalism, lack of understanding, and a tendency to fall into simplistic polarizations. The challenge in studying Crowley is to discern the facts of his complex life and work, separating the myths and controversies from his genuine insights into the nature of consciousness, reality, and human potential through working with the powerful archetypes of the psyche. As we conclude our immersion into the realms where depth psychology meets magical practice, and where Aleister Crowley distinguished himself as an intrepid explorer, we are left with a fundamental question. What does it really mean to manipulate reality? Did Crowley, through his calculating use of archetypes, truly rewrite the laws of the universe, or did he show us a way to rewrite our perception of these laws, and consequently, our experience of them? The beauty and complexity of Crowley's work lies in his ability to transcend the binary definitions of what is real and what is imaginary. He presents us with a universe where the mind is not a mere passive receptor of reality, but an active agent in its co-creation. Archetypes, in his view, are the golden threads that weave the tapestry of existence, the universal patterns that, if understood and skillfully manipulated, can alter the texture and shape of that tapestry. Consider how a musician uses musical notes, a painter uses colors, and an architect uses geometric shapes to create works that evoke emotions, convey ideas, and shape spaces. Crowley proposed that magicians, by working with psychic and symbolic archetypes, were performing a similar feat on a cosmic scale, shaping individual and collective consciousness, and, by extension, manifest reality itself. Manipulation, in this context, is not a brute, external force, but a subtle art of aligning, resonating, and directing energies that already exist within us and in the universe. It is the ability to attune human consciousness to higher or deeper archetypal frequencies, opening portals to new possibilities and understandings. Crowley's work invites us to deeply reflect on our own agency in the world. If archetypes are an integral part of our psyche, and if we are all, to some degree, influenced and guided by them, then understanding these patterns is the first step toward greater freedom. It is the freedom of not simply being carried along by the currents of the collective unconscious, but of learning to navigate them, direct their force, and manifest our own true will. Perhaps Crowley's greatest lesson is not about one man's secret power to control the universe, but about the latent power within each individual to shape their own life experience, to become the artist of their own existence. The search for meaning, self-knowledge, and personal fulfillment is an archetypal journey in itself, and magic, understood as the science of will and the art of change, offers a map and a set of tools to navigate this journey. May this exploration inspire not only curiosity about the mysteries of the occult, but also an invitation to introspection. What archetypes shape your life? How can you consciously work with them to create the reality you truly wish to manifest? The door is open. The path, though challenging, awaits those with the courage to explore the depths of their own consciousness and the cosmos. As we delve deeper into the archetypal manipulation of figures like Aleister Crowley, it is crucial to examine the specific tools and methodologies he employed to access and direct these primordial psychic forces. Far from mere theatrical gestures, Crowleyan rituals were complex systems of psychic engineering designed to create specific resonances in the practitioner's psyche and consequently in the fabric of reality. Central to this arsenal was the use of the language of the stars, which referred not only to traditional astrology but to a deeper system of cosmic correspondences. Crowley, a dedicated and prolific astrologist, compiled extensive tables of correspondences connecting planets, signs, constellations, deities, colors, sounds, and even scents to specific archetypes. This intricate network of interconnections served as a map for magical workings. For example, if a practitioner wished to invoke the archetype of strength and initiative, they could consult these tables to determine that the planet Mars, the sign of Aries, the color red, the sound of a trumpet, and the aroma of pepper corresponded to this energy. The ritual would then be structured to incorporate these elements synergistically, amplifying the directed psychic force. This was not simply a symbolic act, but a way of tuning the practitioner's consciousness to the cosmic vibrations associated with Mars, for example, allowing Martian energy to flow more freely through them. Think of it like tuning a specific radio station. You adjust the dial to the correct frequency to receive the desired transmission. Similarly, Crowley believed that by adjusting the elements of the ritual according to cosmic correspondences, the magician could attune his or her own consciousness to archetypal frequencies. Another powerful tool was the use of sacred names and incantations. Crowley viewed the names of deities, angels, and other entities as concentrated representations of archetypes and their energies. By pronouncing these names, especially in ancient languages such as Hebrew or Egyptian, with proper intention and intonation, the practitioner could invoke and shape the archetypal energy associated with that name. Incantations, in turn, were carefully crafted verbal sequences, often incorporating archetypal metaphors and symbolism, designed to direct the invoked energy toward a specific purpose. He believed that words possessed an inherent vibratory power, and that the precise manipulation of language could effectively shape reality. Now consider how this applies in a practical context. Imagine a visual artist seeking to express the archetype of fertility and abundance in their work. Rather than simply painting a fertile field, he would consult Crowley's correspondences, perhaps incorporating the symbolism of the moon, fertility, receptivity, the archetype of Persephone, bringer of spring, the cycle of life and death, and associated colors such as green and gold. By doing so, consciously and intentionally, he would, according to Crowley's philosophy, not only be representing the archetype, but also activating and manifesting this energy in his creation, potentially influencing the perception and experience of those who contemplate his art. The use of psychoactive substances, though controversial, was also part of Crowley's repertoire to expand consciousness and facilitate contact with the archetypal realms. He saw certain herbs and drugs, when used with magical intent and in proper rituals, as bridges to altered states of consciousness, where the barriers between the self and the archetype become more tenuous. This approach, while controversial and prone to abuse, reflects an understanding that direct experience and altered sensory perception can be powerful catalysts for activating deep psychic patterns. Each of these elements, cosmic language, sacred names, incantations, and expanded consciousness, work together to create a directed energy field. The goal was not simply to think positive, but to engage the entire being, mind, body, and spirit in an active process of alignment and manifestation. Crowley taught us that magic is not an external force acting upon us, but an intrinsic capacity that, when understood and skillfully utilized, allows us to actively participate in the construction of reality. A crucial and often overlooked layer of Crowley's magical practice, which goes beyond the mere invocation of archetypal energies, is the concept of ceremonial magic as a dramatic art and the dissociation of personality. Crowley understood that the very structure of the human mind is malleable, and that the ability to detach from aspects of the ordinary self is fundamental to accessing and manifesting archetypal powers. This does not mean pathological fragmentation, but rather a controlled ability to personify and embody different archetypes at specific moments, allowing the energy associated with them to flow through the practitioner. Imagine an actor who dedicates himself to a role, delving into his psyche, internalizing his motivations, and, for a time, experiencing the world through his eyes. Crowley's ceremonial magic took this to a spiritual and psychic level. The practitioner not only visualized an archetype, such as the Egyptian god Thoth, associated with wisdom, writing, and magic, but also momentarily made it a living, breathing aspect of their own consciousness. This controlled dissociation allowed the magician to transcend the limitations of the ego, which often acts as a restrictive gatekeeper to human potential. By dissociating from the limiting self and associating with the desired archetypal force, the practitioner opened a channel for energies and insights that would normally be inaccessible to them to manifest. This ability was cultivated through rigorous mental and spiritual training, where the practitioner learned to separate the essence of their true will from the fluctuations of the ego. Rather than simply invoking an archetype, the magician, from a Crowleyan perspective, would often wear that archetype like a cloak, allowing it to act through his or her persona. This required a deep understanding of the nature of the archetype in question, its desires, fears, motivations, and sphere of influence. The dramatic art of ceremonial magic involved creating a ritual setting that mirrored the archetype's nature, using vestments and paraphernalia that visually represented it, and performing actions and speeches that embodied its qualities. For example, when working with the victorious king archetype, the practitioner might enact a ritual in which he or she assumes a commanding stance, issues decrees with unwavering authority, and visualizes himself or herself as the center of an expanding domain. This active enactment is not mere fantasy. It is a psychological mechanism that reconfigures the practitioner's own energetic structure, making them a more efficient receptacle and channel for the archetypal energy they seek to manifest. This ability to assume different archetypal roles allowed the magician not only to interact with cosmic forces, but also to apply them in a practical and targeted way in their lives, altering the course of events and manifesting concrete results. The key here is activation, the process by which a latent archetypal potential becomes an active and manifest force, both in the individual and in their surrounding reality. It is the transition from symbol to agent, from concept to living expression. Furthermore, Crowley explored the concept of magic as a dialogue with the cosmic unconscious, where archetypes serve as the fundamental language of this communication. In his work, Liber 7, he describes the need to know every name and number and to measure, referring to the need for a detailed and precise understanding of the archetypes one is working with. This implies that manipulating reality through magic is not a random or arbitrary process, but rather an exact science, where precision in identifying, invoking, and directing archetypes is paramount to success. Crowley saw the universe as a vast living organism, pulsating with archetypal energies that manifest in observable patterns, from the movement of the planets to the complexities of the human psyche. The magician, for him, was one who learned to read these patterns and interact with them constructively. This extended beyond formal rituals, permeating the very way the practitioner saw and interacted with the world. Every event, every encounter, every thought could be interpreted through an archetypal lens, revealing the underlying forces at play and enabling more conscious and effective intervention. Persistence in practice and a constant pursuit of deeper understanding were, therefore, essential, as the cosmic unconscious is vast, and its patterns, though universal, can be subtle and multifaceted. The ability to discern the nuances of each archetype and understand their interconnections was what distinguished a proficient magician from a mere aspirant. The application of these principles extends beyond esotericism, influencing our understanding of creativity and innovation. Consider how a scientist, when formulating a new hypothesis, may unknowingly be tuning into an archetype of discovery or order, allowing information to fall into their lap. Likewise, an entrepreneur who visualizes the success of their venture is not merely daydreaming, but possibly activating the archetype of the conqueror or creator, aligning their psychic energy with the manifestation of their goals. Crowley presents us with the idea that magic is, in essence, the art of catalyzing latent potential, and archetypes are the primordial catalysts. By learning to recognize and work with these forces, any individual can become a more effective agent in shaping their own reality and contributing to the evolution of collective consciousness. Art, science, and spirituality become, in this context, different avenues for exploring and interacting with the same archetypal universe. Mastery, according to Crowley, lies in the ability to apply this knowledge ethically and with a clear purpose, aligned with the individual's true will and the greater good. He urges us to see life not as a series of random events, but as a playing field where understanding archetypal forces enables us to play with greater skill and intention. An additional facet of Crowley's magical practice, which transcends the simple invocation of archetypal energies and delves into the minutiae of psyche reconfiguration, lies in the application of so-called magical perfumes and their intricate correspondences. Crowley, a connoisseur of fragrances and olfactory alchemy, saw aroma not as a mere sensory ornament, but as a powerful key to unlocking specific states of consciousness and attuning the magician to specific archetypal realms. He believed that each fragrance possessed a unique energetic vibration, capable of directly influencing the individual's nervous system and energy field, opening pathways to psychic perceptions and facilitating the manifestation of will. For example, the use of frankincense was often associated with archetypes of wisdom, spirituality, and celestial realms, and was employed in deep meditation rituals or to invoke the energy of the Egyptian god Ra. In contrast, more earthy and pulsating fragrances, such as those derived from musk or patchouli, were reserved for invoking archetypes of fertility, physical vitality, and telluric forces. often linked to goddesses such as Venus or the Earth itself, the application of these substances was not random. Crowley possessed an encyclopedic knowledge of alchemical correspondences, with each scent being associated with a planet, an element, a color, a day of the week, and, crucially, a specific archetype. Continuing this line of microscopic detail, Crowley also explored the influence of sound and music on psychic manipulation. He understood that sound, in its various frequencies and harmonies, had the ability to resonate with the vibrational patterns of the universe and the human psyche, acting as a powerful agent of transformation. Crowley frequently incorporated chants in ancient languages, mantras, and even specific melodies into his rituals, each precisely chosen to evoke or strengthen a particular archetype. The correct intonation of a sacred word, the melody of a chant, or the harmony of musical instruments could, he believed, alter the density of the magician's energy field, making him more receptive to the desired influences. For example, deep resonant sounds, such as those produced by drums or horns, were used to anchor material energies or invoke archetypes of earthly strength and power. In contrast, higher-pitched and more ethereal melodies, such as those of flutes or bells, were employed to facilitate contact with astral realms and invoke archetypes of inspiration, intuition, and transcendence. This understanding of music as a form of sonic alchemy allowed the magician to modulate his state of consciousness and the environment around him, creating a field conducive to the manifestation of his will. Furthermore, the manipulation of color and light in rituals is an intrinsic aspect of Crowley's methodology of archetypal activation. He understood that each color carries a distinct vibrational frequency and is intrinsically linked to certain archetypes and cosmic energies. The use of specific colored garments, the lighting of rooms with correspondingly colored candles, and the visualization of specific colored auras were deliberate tools to attune the practitioner and the environment to the desired archetypal qualities. For example, red could be associated with the warrior or passion archetype, blue with wisdom and calm, and green with fertility and growth. By employing a carefully selected color palette in a ritual, the magician created an environment charged with symbolic and energetic meaning, which functioned as a disguise or vehicle for the archetype to manifest more fully. This meticulous attention to visual detail was not merely aesthetic, was a fundamental component of magical language, a way of projecting intentions onto the subtle plane and attracting the corresponding cosmic forces. Another essential dimension of Crowley's magical practice, which deepens the concept of archetypal manipulation, is the application of sexual alchemy, or sexual magic. Crowley viewed sexual energy as the most potent and primal creative force in the universe, a vast reservoir of power that, when properly channeled and directed with magical intent, could be harnessed to manifest significant changes in reality. He argued that sexual rituals, when performed with conscious purpose and a focus on activating specific archetypes, could serve as a portal for the manifestation of will. This was not mere hedonism, but a rigorous practice that involved a deep understanding of sexual energy and its transmutation into spiritual and creative force. Various archetypes, such as the mother goddess in her facet of fertility and creation, Nuit and Babylon in his work, or the beast god as the primal force of nature, were frequently invoked and embodied through these rituals. The energy released during the sexual act, instead of being dissipated, was consciously directed through visualizations and incantations towards a specific magical objective, acting as a powerful accelerator in the manifestation of the will. As we unravel the layers of archetypal influence and its subtle applications, a deeper understanding of the intricate dance between the human psyche and the manifested universe emerges. The pathways we explore reveal not just a method of operation, but a fundamental philosophy about the nature of existence and the human potential to shape it. The diverse facets of the practice, from symbolic and sonic language to performative gestures and internal resonances, converge on a crucial point: the conscious activation of patterns intrinsic to the very fabric of reality. Reflecting on this journey thus far, we realize that the fabric of human experience is composed of threads that, though invisible to ordinary perception, possess palpable strength and direction. In light of these insights, the path forward becomes clearer, suggesting that understanding archetypes is not merely an academic study or an isolated esoteric practice, but a master key to unlocking the inner workings of the world we inhabit and of ourselves. The interconnections we have examined paint a picture in which the mind acts not as a mere spectator, but as an active participant, a catalyst for potentials yet unrealized. The energies that seem to reside in the realms of myth and depth psychology reveal themselves to be dynamic tools whose skillful handling can redefine the limits of what we consider possible. It is as if, throughout this exploration, we have learned to read a complex map of invisible currents, realizing that we are not simply at their mercy, but that we can, with knowledge and intention, navigate them and even influence their trajectory. As we approach the final reflection, it is clear that the complexities explored converge toward a broader recognition of individual agency. The journey leads us to ponder the very essence of reality, whether it is something fixed and immutable, or whether it is, in large part, a blank canvas to be painted by our perceptions, intentions, and the activation of primordial forces. The concepts we explore in their entirety suggest a vision of the universe where the boundary between the internal and the external, the psychic and the physical, is much more fluid than one might suppose. The ideas presented encourage us to consider the possibility that the manipulation of reality, in its deepest sense, is an act of conscious alignment, a harmonization with the fundamental rhythms of the cosmos and the human psyche. This convergence of elements prepares us for a broader perspective, one that integrates the knowledge acquired and applies it to a richer understanding of existence. As we unravel the veils that shroud the intricate tapestry of archetypal influence, especially through the lens of Aleister Crowley, we are compelled to profoundly reevaluate the nature of reality and our role as agents in this vibrant cosmos. The journey through primordial symbols, sounds, colors, and energies was not a mere exploration of an esoteric system, but an immersion into the foundations of human experience itself. What emerges is not a manual for absolute control, but a revelation into the subtle art of resonance, an invitation to harmonize our consciousness with the primordial frequencies that shape both the macrocosm and the microcosm. Crowley, in his audacity, challenged us to see the universe not as an external and indifferent entity, but as an expansive mirror of our own psyches, a dynamic field where intention, when focused and energized through archetypal understanding, can truly reconfigure the landscape of existence. Reality manipulation, as presented, transcends the idea of forcing events against their nature. It is, rather, the art of aligning one's own essence with universal currents, of becoming a conscious channel for the forces already at work in the fabric of life. Archetypes, these immutable patterns of the collective psyche, are not merely models to be invoked, but rather the very grammar of the universe, the language through which existence expresses itself and transforms itself. By understanding this language, by learning to speak with the archetypes, we unlock the potential to co-create, to actively participate in the ceaseless dance of manifestation. Mastery, therefore, lies not in mastering external forces, but in mastering oneself, in refining consciousness until it can resonate harmoniously with the underlying laws of creation. True practice begins now, not with a specific ritual or secret formula, but with the constant observation and conscious application of these principles in every aspect of daily life. Every interaction, every thought, every choice becomes an opportunity to attune one's frequency to true will, to weave the desired reality with the precision of a cosmic artist. Crowley's journey, with its triumphs and controversies, serves as a beacon, illuminating the path for those seeking to transcend perceived limitations and embrace the vast potential that resides in the conscious alignment between the inner self and the outer cosmos. May curiosity drive us to continue exploring the mysteries of the mind and the universe, always remembering that the greatest magic resides in the human capacity to understand, choose, and manifest the extraordinary.